Thank you very much for your introduction. Hello, everybody. I'm very pleased to see the names of many friends among the people who are able to attend this meeting, and I'm not going to wait more. In 2002, after more than 20 years of political instability and after the trauma of the destruction of Bamiyan Buddha, it seems possible to see a new era for cultural heritage preservation and archaeology in Afghanistan. Today, considering the current situation, we have to analyze what has been done, what have been positive but also negative action, and what should be the next step. Speaking from the viewpoint of the French Archaeological Delegation, which has been in this country since almost a century, I'm going to illustrate these 20 years with the result of the works of DAFA, but as we shall see, these results are mostly the result of a collaboration. First of all with our Afghan colleagues, but also with other partners such as the Aga Khan Foundation for Culture, ALIF, UNESCO, Dutch Archaeological Institute, ISIAO, Balkh, etc. That means that if the viewpoint is DAFA, the results themselves are belonging to all these partners. In 1922, with DAFA, official archaeology started in Afghanistan. Since then, a lot of data had been collected in a very unstable political context. From 1982 to 2001, the situation of the country evolved in such a way that there was no more control of the archaeological heritage, and major lootings and destruction occurred. This is a picture of the looting in 1995 on the site of Tepe-Zargaran in Balkh. You see how destructive this looting had been. This is a picture of the looting of the wall painting in Mes Aynak. You can see that the upper part of the paintings are missing. They have been looted. In 2001, the Institute of Archaeology of Afghanistan was the only actor in the field of archaeology, with no cars, no computers, a staff reduced to a small group of people with no capacity to organize excavations, surveys, or to have an eye on the archaeological site, which were for most of them left to the looters. The National Museum was in ruins. A part of the collection had been stolen or destroyed. When DAFA and the other foreign missions resumed their work, the impression was that they had to start everything from zero. We have to set up a new program. And in this new program, we had to define, I would say, what were the most important points. The first one was to stop the illegal excavation. And it appears that the only way to stop illegal excavation was to start proper excavation scientific program on the most exposed site. And this what I'm going to show you is what we have been doing in some of these sites. Then after, the second point to stop the illegal excavation was to monitor the sites with the support of the local community. It appears that the involvement of local community was probably the best way to stop or to limit the looting. Then the third point was to work on the project of an archaeological map. As an archaeological map was the only way to have a tool to monitor archaeological heritage and archaeological sites. In 1982, already had been published by DAFA, the Archaeological Gazetteer of Afghanistan, compiled by Mr. Warwick Ball, where more than 1,700 sites had been identified. The new data we had, as well as the new tools which were available, as well as the new needs, such as the extensive monitoring of the site and their management, were strong elements to suggest to develop a new archaeological map based on the GIS system. And that's one of the important points of this new program of this program, which was possible with the political condition in 2002 and 2003. The second important part of this program was protection. And again, protection of the site was only possible unless we were able to involve the local community. And you will see that in all the examples we are going to give, this involvement had been the focus point of all our program. And the third important point was training. As I told you, there were almost nobody left as archaeologists in the country, so it was very important to train again young archaeologists in the country first through the archaeological excavation, which could be also excellent training field, then abroad with organizing grants and capacity building program in the university, whether in France or in the States or in Germany. About the field activity, I'm going here to talk about not all the activity which had been conducted by DAFA or activity in which DAFA was involved during these last 20 years, but I select 6 examples which, according to me, are giving a good example of what had been done, what was also what kind of program had been implemented, but also the limits and the point which reached in this year, and what has been left without completion. The main focus of DAFA at the very beginning had been the north of Afghanistan, and specifically the oasis of Balkh. This had been a place where DAFA had been working in 1923 and again in 1957. So the idea was not to repeat what had been done, but to try to see with different eyes what had been already studied by our predecessors. In Balkh, our work focused on 4 major points. The first one was to have a proper chronology of the city wall. This is an example of the work which had been done in 2005 and 2008. On the city wall of Balkh. This is the work done by my friend Pascal Monde. We got a proper stratigraphical analysis of a part of. So to deal with, to go back with what I was talking about, this is, I would say, one of the major aim of our work in Balkh was to have, I would say, proper scientific information about the site itself. And one of the important point was to get a proper chronology of the city wall, and that's what we did. And with a proper stratigraphical analysis, then chronological analysis of part of the city wall in the place where it was in the best shape of preservation. So we have been able to identify 6 different periods from the Achaemenid Hellenistic time up to the 7th century AD, with phases belonging to Kushan, early Kushan, Kushano-Sassanid, and late Kushano-Sassanid periods. The other points where we wanted to have, I would say, proper scientific information was the site of Tepe Zargaran, which is located to the east of the site of Balkh. This site had been heavily looted. A lot of architectural and elements had been retrieved during this looting. And these are pictures of Hellenistic element documented by a picture taken by a member of an NGO in 1995. And the purpose of our work was to identify exactly the original location of these stones. And due to a good collaboration with the local community, who had also been involved in the looting, I would say, we were able to retrieve the original location of this architectural element, which were divided in 2 elements. I would say those from the earlier period, which are belonging to the Hellenistic period, which were part of a big construction, probably designed to cross a small river. But which had been heavily looted. As you can see, there is all over this picture, which are showing the place where the looting occurs. And the second part of this architectural elements were belonging to a later period, probably the 2nd century AD, and they had been reused in a small water channel. You can see here the map of the water channel as we have been able to reconstruct it, and also in the place where there is no more blocks, in the voids sea area, which had been heavily looted. The second place where we did some excavation was the Balaissar of Balkh. Balaissar of Balkh is a very impressive fortress, almost circular, 1 kilometer in diameter. And we were able to make a big trench on the verge of this fortress. And we have been able to there also to reconstruct a proper stratigraphy starting from at the end of the 2nd millennium BC and going up to the Islamic period. From all these elements, it was also possible to reconstruct the shape and the evolution of the city wall of Balkh, with, I would say, the round structure of the Balaissar dating from the Achaemenid period, then a square structure to the south, then with to the very south of this site, this huge south wall of Balkh, which is one of the most impressive remains of this fortification. But we were also able to document the extension of the fortification, and what had been also a very good surprise is that we had been able also to work in the south of the site of Balkh, around a site excavated by Fouché in 1922 to Topiristan. This is a blue circle you can see, and around it we were able to reconstruct what is probably the limit of the original monastery of Nobar. Second important point in the north of Balkh Oasis, in the south of Balkh Oasis, is the site of Cheshme Shafar, which is 20 kilometers south to Balkh. The blue arrow to the top is Balkh, the blue one, which is just under, is Cheshme Shafar. Cheshme Shafar is a very important site. You can see the blue arrow that it's located in a narrow straits where the water of the Balkh are flowing. Here a picture of the site, which is a very impressive site, a site which had been partly identified in 1923 by Fouché, but never really excavated. And we had the chance to explore it starting from 2007 with Roland Bezoval, and we were able to identify that the site was much bigger than what had been visited by Fouché in 1923, and that in very impressive remains dating from the Achaemenid period up to the 12th century BC were still preserved. This is, I would say, a view of the wall of the lower part of the site. And you can see important remains of this Achaemenid construction. The upper part of the site is divided in two areas. The one which is called Kafir Kala, which is overlooking the lower part of the city, and on which had been identified this big stone block, which had been identified as potentially being a fire altar, Atesh Gadeh. Unfortunately, when you arrive on site, the site had been already looted, and part of the stratigraphical collection of the Atesh Gadeh had been completely destroyed. Here, the Atesh Gadeh, the fire altar, once completely excavated. And here it's an overview where you can see in the lower part the Atesh Gadeh, and close from it construction which are belonging to the fortification system of this Kafir Kala, with, I would say, part of the wall of this Kafir Kala. In the other side of the other part of the upper part of the site, there is a called Kouy El Brouj. We are able to identify up to the very top construction from the Achaemenid period, most of them being looted, as you can see on this picture. Last visit we did in this site of Cheshme Shafa was in 2018, and we were able to identify on the bank of the river this strange, I won't say construction, because it's a bedrock which has been completely chipped and shaped in a very strange way, and we were wondering if it was not also some kind of structure linked to religious practice. The whole work we did in Balkh was also a way to have a better understanding of the oasis of Balkh as a whole. And we were able to make survey all over this oasis and to identify or to re-identify sites from various periods. This is the site of Dilbergine Tepe, excavated by the Russian in the 70s, which is at the very limit. It's one of the blue arrow. I think that's the one which is on the left. The interesting thing is that this site is just beside the oasis wall. Oasis wall, which has been identified also by the Russian in the 70s, but we were able during the recent years to recognize on the east part and the west part of this oasis wall extension of now, and we have now a total extension of this oasis wall of more than 100 kilometers. This is another site from the Islamic period called Zayyan. You can see in the middle there is a square structure, which is the fortress, and around it we have, I would say, a very interesting pattern, geometrical patterns, which seem to be, I would say, the land occupation patterns from the probably Kushan and certainly Islamic period. And this is a picture of this oasis wall as it is still visible at the very limit of the oasis of Balkh. You can see it's sometimes well preserved. In other parts, it's the only, I would say, very, very tiny remains. For last site we have been excavating in the Balkh oasis is the Mosque of Haji Piada, and indebted to the late Dr. Sharia Ad, who had been the one who, in 2007, resumed the work in Haji Piada and made, I would say, a seminal paper about the datation of this mosque. So we were able, the last year, in coordination with our friends from Aga Foundation for Culture, and especially Araj Boustani, we were able to resume excavation on this mosque. And it appears in 2019 that we were able to identify this view of the mosque under restoration, and during excavation also, we were able to identify, and this is a view of the gorgeous decoration of this mosque. We were able to identify first, I would say, inscription on the soil of the mosque, inscription which just seems to mean that this mosque has been used as a madrasa at the time. But also the important point that we were able to identify that is there was inside this mosque a second mihrab. So we had a mosque with at least two parts and with probably two functions or potentially two kind of public, let us say. And this is a picture of the mihrab with this also stucco decoration. Still in the north, one project we are still trying to implement in Afghanistan, and which is fitting with the title of this series of conference, is the site we are still planning to excavate in the Wahan corridor. It's the site of Kansir. Wahan corridor is the eastern tip of Afghanistan, with a common border with China of 50 kilometers. And on the middle of this picture, you have, I would say, the location of this site of Kansir, which is a fort overlooking the river of Pianj, which is the upper part of the Amudarya. It's a region which is difficult in terms of logistic, and but which is very rich in terms of archaeological remains and evidences, and specifically, I would say, with the petroglyph, which seems to be scattered all over the mountains. Second big problem, a program in which DAFA had been involved with our friends of the Archaeological Institute, had been Herat. We had been working in Herat in 2 places. Here, it's a view of the excavation of the Kouandis in Herat, where we had been able to uncover Achaemenid occupation. This is an excavation which had been done by Julien Cuny, and also excavation in the Ikhtiaruddin, which is the main fortress of Herat, where a Dutch Archaeological Institute was also able to reach Achaemenid layers. But the project in which we are working since some times, and we are still expecting to resume work, is Musala, a place where DAFA had been working in 2016 and 17 with Thomas Laurin, Sandra Aube, and Julio Benchezius Sarmiento. They had been working in the Madrasa Sultan Usaid Baykara. Here it's a picture of the 6th minaret of the complex of Go Arshad. The idea in this site of Musala is to have a proper archaeological expertise of all the site before restoration. And you see on this picture how restoration is necessary, as this is a 6th minaret of the Musala, and you can see that it's leaning and it needs urgent care. And it's one of the main concerns we have today is what is going to happen with this kind of monument. And this is a view of the part of the Madrasa Sultan Usaid Baykara. Let's go now to Helmand, to the south of Afghanistan. DAFA had been working in Helmand, it's Lashkari Bazzar, in the 50s, from 1949 to 1952. It's a huge site from Islamic period, mainly Ghaznavid and Khorid, which is in danger of destruction due to illegal occupation. This is a picture of the site, and specifically of part of the site excavated by DAFA, Palace of Massoud, in the 1950s. You see all around the remains of buildings from the Islamic period related to this palace. This is a picture of the same site in 2008. And in between these two periods, first, I would say the city of Lashkar expanded up to reach the archaeological site, and second, there was a massive occupation by illegal settler in the site itself, in the palaces themselves. This is a picture of the other end of the site of Lashkari Bazzar, the fortress of Boost. Here, the problem is not illegal occupation. The problem is that you can see it's mainly erosion, which is little by little destroying this complete architectural structure. It's a picture that of the looters inside of the palace of Massoud, and which shows the emergency of an intervention in this site. This is another palace in between the palace of Boost and the fortress of Boost and the palace of Massoud. You can see that here the problem is mainly, I would say, destruction due to erosion. And we are just witnessing right now the slow but certain destruction of what are really a very important Islamic monument. And this is a view of the monumental well of Boost, which is inside the fortress. It had been, it was excavated by our friend Farid Aigdari with a team of Afghan archaeologists, and then now I think it's left that it is, and obviously this well needs also urgent preservation. Logar province is not far from Kabul, and since 2009, DAFA and Institute of Archaeology of Afghanistan have been involved in the massive program of rescue excavation on the site of Mes Aynak. The site was known before, had been looted probably between 2000 and 2005. These are pictures of the statue, which has been retrieved by the Afghan authorities, and a statue which were coming from the site of Mes Aynak. This is the site that it was just before excavation. That what we see on the picture is one Buddhist monastery, the place of one Buddhist monastery, Kafiriat Tepe. This is the other extension of the site on the south of the site, the village of Golamid, which is also built over a Buddhist monastery. What you can see also is the construction made by the Chinese, what we call the Chinese camp, which was devoted to the mine exploitation of the site of Mes Aynak. So very quickly, it appears that this site of Mes Aynak was incredibly rich in terms of archaeology. These are the first element of statue we had been able to find. There was thousands of statues which had been excavated, almost 12 monasteries, wall paintings, you see, of different kind. All of this site being scattered over an area of 4 square kilometers. And an area which has probably been occupied since the Bronze Age, since we have a few elements related to this period and suggesting that even in the Bronze Age, copper excavation in this site had been started, but the main occupation documented by archaeology are from the 1st century AD up to the 7th century, 1st century BC up to the 7th century AD. And this is the distribution of all the monasteries. What is in black is the building which had been identified for sure as monastery. What is in purple is probably building dedicated to another function. It's not, I'm not sure that it's a monastery. All of this is around. Is located around the area where copper is found in the geological deposit and where the copper has been exploited. This is a last picture of the wall paintings. This one is hopefully in the National Museum of Afghanistan, and the manuscripts, which are for part of them still on site. Kabul area, the main operation we had been involved in Kabul area had been the Balaisar in Kabul. Kabul Balaisar, kind of Louvre of Afghanistan, or Tower of London. It's an historical site of an extreme importance, the residence of the Emir of Kabul, and a very important point in the history of Afghanistan, because it's in this place that the two Anglo-Afghan war started in 1939, 1941, and 1979, 1881. And this is still a very, very impressive fortress. And we started the work in very early in 2007. We did some survey, and the survey were very positive. We were able to discover that the site, and it was very, very different from the other sites we had been excavating in Afghanistan. The site had never been looted. And the archaeological deposits are very well preserved. Here we made big trench, and we are able to check that for almost 6 meters, we have the complete stratigraphy with deposit going back to the 2nd century BC. So now to go back to this project in Balaisar. Now we have been resuming our work in Balaisar since the month of October in the framework of a bigger program, which is a program which has been built by Aga Khan Foundation. This program is to first to have a scientific exploration of the site, and then we have a huge program of restoration of this fortress. And then after to create around this fortress a public part and to improve the urban environment of the area. I'm not going to discuss that much about Bamiyan because I think that it's a site which is well known. DAFA has been involved in various ways, first in supporting our friend Dr. Tarzi. This is a picture of the excavation he did on the stupa of Bamiyan. Then after in the frameworks of the work which had been done by UNESCO in order to try to get, I would say, a proper archaeological expertise on sites like Shari Kholkhola. This is a work which has been done by our friend Thomas Laurin and Julio Benjesu Sarmiento. Then I want to, as you see, I would say I'm just giving you a very, very wide overview of what we have been doing, and in order to give time to a discussion, and then also to have to consider what we can do in the present situation. What danger for Afghan cultural heritage? There are identified threats which were known from a long time. First, illegal excavation, and we have seen that it was possible to fight against illegal excavations, first in doing proper excavations and in trying to involve the community. The illegal excavation had been, I would say, it's not. We have been partly successful, partly unsuccessful, because obviously in place where we have been working, illegal excavation stopped, but in other part, but when we left, illegal excavations start again. So it's an issue which is very, very difficult to handle, and still I think that we have to discuss to find the best way to fight against this illegal excavation. Second, and that's probably what is going to be the major problem in the coming years, it's the environmental issue. It does seem that Afghanistan and archaeological site of Afghanistan are strongly impacted by the climatic change. And in the coming years, I would say we may fear that many important monuments could disappear. It's true for Shahrizoak in Bamiyan Valley. It's true for the minaret of Jam. And we have a real concern about this because for the moment, it's very difficult to know how we can deal with them. The third danger is the development. You have seen an example for Lashkari Bazzar, how the extension of the city of Lashkar had been negative to the site of Lashkari Bazzar. It's the same, I would say, for Mes Aynak. I would say the exploitation of mineral resources can impact strongly archaeological sites, knowing that, for example, for metals such as gold, silver, copper, and iron, they have been also mined during antiquity, and most of the identified sites today had been identified as also sites which had been mined during antiquity. So these were, I would say, the things, the danger we were facing and the danger we are trying to address in the coming years. Then now the situation, I would say, is evolving in a very, very different way, as we have now a very upsetting situation. Today's situation is that most of the Afghan expertise, the expertise we had been Afghans themselves, but also international support had been building, this expertise is gone. Second, funding now are going to be very, very difficult to get. And so it means that all these programs I have been referring, probably those who are still working are going probably to stop. And with the lack of expertise, the lack of funding, it's obvious that field operations are going to stop, and that's a real concern. So what to do and what we have to consider? Obviously, if we consider the current situation, something had been, it's very difficult to say that we have been acting in a wrong way, but I think that we have to consider to rebuild a system which is more sustainable, a system which is able to cope with archaeological heritage, whatever the political situation. The second point, which is according to me very important, is to say again, and that's already what had been said in the introduction, that cultural heritage should be kept apart from the conflict and should not be an element taken by one side or the other to deal, I would say, to create more conflict. Then it should be finally said that we have to consider that this cultural heritage of Afghanistan is an universal value. It's a cultural heritage for everybody, and it should be cared about it. Finally, I would say that at the beginning, in the introduction, it had been referred to the humanitarian crisis. And it's very clear that when the people are suffering, cultural heritage is suffering. And the reverse is true. When cultural heritage is suffering, the people are suffering, and that it should be maybe a good subject of discussion, and that this will be my conclusion, and I give the field to the question. Thank you very much for your attention.